On the night of our silver wedding anniversary, my husband didn't hand me a gift. He handed me divorce papers. 25 years is long enough, he said, standing tall in front of all our guests, his voice calm but cold. I want someone young now, and you'll need to be out of the condo by tomorrow. For a moment, the laughter in the room died. Every fork froze midair, and from the corner, his mother, Evelyn Price, smiled, a quiet, satisfied smile. I didn't cry. I just stood up, took the microphone, and said something that made the confident grin vanish from his face. But that part comes later. That night, hours before the world fell apart, I woke up to whispers behind the bedroom door. Kevin's voice, low, urgent, and another voice, his mother's sharp and deliberate. "We have to do this right," Kevin said. "She won't suspect a thing." "Of course not, son," Evelyn answered. The words crawled through the dark like insects. I stayed still, my eyes half open, listening, every sense sharp as glass. When Kevin returned to bed, I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. His body was tense beside me. He breathed unevenly, the way people do when they lie to themselves. The next morning, he was all smiles. "Laura, my love," he said, brushing my hair from my face and kissing my cheek. He smelled of new cologne, expensive, foreign. "Let's pick the restaurant for our anniversary. I want everything to be perfect." Perfect. A word that never existed in his vocabulary before. In 25 years of marriage, Kevin had never cared about celebrations. I always planned them. He only criticized. "Fine," I said, watching him grab his briefcase and leave. When the door closed, I noticed his phone on the nightstand. It lit up with a notification. "Call S at 11 a.m. Later, as I watered the plants by the window, I asked lightly, "Who's S?" Kevin froze for half a second, then turned with an awkward smile. "Ah, Stevens, a colleague from Seattle, just work stuff." His left eye twitched, the same tell he'd had since college whenever he lied. I just nodded, but something in my chest tightened. After he left, I stared out over Georgetown's gray October sky. 25 years, a quarter of a century since that autumn day when we met in college. I was a quiet accounting student. He was an ambitious manager in training. We dreamed of a big house, children, a future that never came. The doctors said nothing was wrong, yet the miracle of life never happened. Kevin took it harder than I did, especially when his mother began dropping her poisonous remarks about grandchildren. Over time, we stopped talking about it, burying the ache under work and travel, and the illusion of normalcy. A knock on the door startled me. When I opened it, Evelyn Price stood there in her pearls and fur, carrying the scent of roses and cold air. "Laura dear," she said, stepping inside without waiting. "How are the anniversary preparations?" Kevin mentioned a restaurant. "Yes," I replied. "He wants something elegant." "Very wise," she said, scanning the room with those judgmental eyes that had measured me for 25 years. "Public celebrations show class. Home parties can feel so small." Then, in that same sugary tone that always carried poison, she added, "Kevin's turning 53 soon. Maybe it's time to think about the future. Have you considered writing a will? You know, for the grandchildren." I blinked. "We don't have grandchildren, Evelyn." "Well," she said quickly, waving her hand, "for my nephews then. Good boys. Someone has to inherit eventually." She paused, sipping tea. "By the way, where do you keep the condo papers? Just curious." The words dropped like stones into the silence between us. "In the safe," I said quietly. "Why?" "Oh, no reason, dear. Just in case. You never know what life brings." When she left, the air felt heavy. I sat still, connecting the dots. The midnight whispers, Kevin's sudden affection, Evelyn's talk about wills and property. A pattern was forming and I was right in the middle of it. I walked to Kevin's study. His laptop sat open on the desk. For 25 years, his password had never changed, the date we met. But when I typed it, the screen blinked red. Wrong password. My stomach dropped. I tried his birthday, his mother's, nothing then. I reversed our wedding date. Click, it opened. The browser history was a wound bleeding truth. How to divorce when shared assets exist. How to keep the condo in a divorce. Spousal rights in property division. Page after page, my fingers trembled. The betrayal wasn't just emotionally, it was planned, researched, executed like a business deal. The phone rang, cutting through the silence. It was Denise, my closest friend. "Laura," she said, her voice uneasy. "I saw Kevin today. He was at Tyson's Galleria with a young blonde. They were at a jewelry store, looking at rings." "What does she look like?" I asked softly. "About 30, blonde, expensive coat." She was all over him. "Are you okay?" I'm fine, I lied. Thank you, Denise. That evening, Kevin returned home, all smiles, holding roses and a box of chocolates. For my one and only, he said, handing them to me. I looked at him and smiled back. We need to talk about our future, I said quietly. His shoulders tensed. After the party, he said quickly, let's not spoil the mood. After the party, the way he said it sent a chill down my spine, as if he'd already scheduled my downfall. I smiled, nodded, and played the role of the oblivious wife one last time. What Kevin didn't know was that I had already stopped being his victim. The next morning, I woke up with a strange heaviness in my chest, like the air itself was warning me that something had already gone wrong. Kevin was cheerful again, humming to himself as he adjusted his tie. Big day today, he said, sipping his coffee. Lots of meetings. I just smiled, watching him. His phone buzzed, face down on the table, and for a split second the screen lit up. My heart didn't skip. It hardened. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. I already knew enough. I wanted him to think I was still in the dark. That was the safest place to be. When he left, I walked to the window and stared out at the city, thinking, he wasn't just cheating, he was planning something. A setup, something public, humiliating, and final. The condo, the life we'd built it, was all part of their game. But they'd made one mistake. They thought I was naive. By mid-morning the home phone rang. Kevin had forgotten his cell again, and the answering machine clicked on. It's Mom, Evelyn's voice said. I spoke to Mr. Hayes. Everything can be arranged. The important thing is that she doesn't suspect a thing until the very last moment. Mr. Hayes, the same name Kevin had mentioned before as a colleague. Now everything fit. I played the message again, recorded it on my own phone, and saved it. One more piece of evidence. That afternoon, I called Monica Cole, an old college friend who'd become one of the best family attorneys in D.C. Laura, she said, surprised. It's been ages. I know, I replied, trying to sound calm, but I need to see you today. It's urgent. Her office was in a high-rise downtown, with glass walls overlooking the Potomac. When I arrived, she hugged me warmly, but looked at my face and understood immediately. Sit down, she said softly. Tell me what's going on. I told her everything, the whispers at 3 a.m., the searches on Kevin's computer, the phone messages, the blonde woman. Monica listened quietly, taking notes, occasionally nodding. When I finished, she leaned back and sighed. You did the right thing by coming. They're preparing a psychological trap, something public, to make you sign under pressure, probably at the anniversary party. I've seen this kind of thing before. I swallowed. How do I protect myself? First, gather proof. Take screenshots of every message, every email, record conversations if you can. Second, secure your finances. Move a portion of the joint money into an account only in your name, something he can't touch. And third, don't let them know you know. Let them believe you're still the obedient wife. That's your shield. Her calm tone steadied me. For the first time in days, I felt the ground under my feet again. And the condo? I asked. We bought it in 2005. Both our names are on the title. Monica flipped through her notes. Who paid for it originally? My parents, I said. They transferred the money as a gift before we added Kevin's name. She looked up sharply. Then it may legally qualify as your premarital asset. If that's true, he has no right to it unless he can prove he invested heavily in renovations. Did he? I laughed bitterly. Kevin never fixed a light bulb. Monica smiled. Then you have nothing to fear if we can confirm the paperwork. Do you remember who handled the closing? A real estate lawyer named Thomas Perry. Perfect. Go see him tomorrow. Get a certified copy of the deed and the gift transfer record. I nodded, feeling the first spark of power return. Thank you, Monica. She waved a hand. No fee. But promise me one thing, keep calm. You're smarter than both of them. Don't let their noise drown your silence. When I returned home, that evening, Kevin was in front of the mirror, adjusting his shirt, humming again. You look tired, Laura, he said, not meeting my eyes. Maybe start going to the gym again. You've let yourself go a bit. You're still beautiful, but you could be stunning if you tried. He smiled, like he was doing me a favor. I just watched him, my expression blank. You're right, I said softly. I'll try harder. He didn't even notice the sarcasm. That night, when he showered, I checked our joint bank account. My breath caught. Over $30,000 had been withdrawn in the past month, in small transfers, easy to miss. Jewelry, hotel bills, payments to a law firm named Hayes and Associates. He was using our money to destroy me. I closed the laptop and laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that feels like a tear inside your throat. The next morning, as if fate had decided to tip the balance, a letter arrived from Germany. It was from a notary's office. My late Aunt Josephine, my father's older sister, had passed away. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but I had been her only niece. She'd left me everything: a condo in Munich worth $800,000, a bank account with nearly $600,000, and a luxury apartment in Miami Beach valued at over $1 million. My hands trembled as I read the letter. For a moment, I felt like crying, but then I smiled, not out of joy, but out of clarity. Kevin thought he held all the cards. He didn't know that the game had already changed. That afternoon, I made an appointment with Thomas Perry, the real estate lawyer who had helped us buy the Georgetown condo 20 years ago. His office smelled of old books and polished wood. "Loud as sterling," he said warmly when I entered. "It's been a long time." "How's Kevin?" "Busy," I said, taking a seat. "I need your help, and it must remain confidential." His eyes narrowed with concern. "Of course, what's going on? Do you still have the file from when we bought the condo?" "I should," he said, pulling out an old cabinet drawer and flipping through yellow folders. "Here we go. Ah yes, I remember now. It was an unusual case. The funds came directly from your parents' account, and the deed lists you as the sole recipient. Kevin's name was added 2 months later, after the purchase. So, legally, it's your premarital property. That could make all the difference if there's a dispute." I let out a long breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Could you prepare an official document confirming that?" "Of course," he said kindly. "Come back tomorrow afternoon." When I stepped back into the autumn air, something shifted inside me. For the first time in years, I felt steady, composed, untouchable. I walked home slowly, past the cafes and golden trees, past couples laughing over coffee, and I thought, 25 years of loyalty, and this is what it came to. But maybe betrayal isn't the end of a story. Maybe it's the start of a better one. When I returned home that evening, the condo was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. A courier envelope lay on the table, thick, official, sealed with a German notary's stamp. Inside were the final documents for my Aunt Josephine's inheritance: the property titles, account summaries, and a letter written in her neat, old-fashioned script. "You were always the thoughtful one, Laura. I know you will use this wisely." I sat there, the papers spread out before me, the golden light of sunset washing over everything. It felt surreal. Less than a week ago, my husband and his mother had been planning to ruin me. Now, I held in my hands freedom, not just financial, but emotional. Kevin thought I was trapped. He thought he could destroy me. He didn't know that the only thing holding me was the silence before a storm. That night, Kevin came home late, smelling of the same perfume I'd noticed on his jacket days before. Soft, floral, expensive. "Long day?" I asked, my tone light. He hesitated. "Yeah. Meetings ran over. You know how it is." "Of course," I said, smiling faintly. "Did you manage to talk to Stevens?" He blinked. "Stevens. From Seattle," I added casually. "The one you mentioned last week." His left eye twitched. "Oh yes, work's going well." He kissed my forehead and walked away, relief written across his shoulders. I watched him go, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just distance. The next morning, he called from work. His voice was cheerful, rehearsed. "Laura, my love, I was thinking, let's really celebrate our anniversary. Something big. Colleagues, friends, everyone. I've already reserved the ballroom at the Watergate Hotel. 100 people. Can you imagine?" My stomach turned. "That's a lot," I said slowly. "Why such a big celebration?" "Because it's a milestone," he replied smoothly. "I want everyone to see how perfect we are." "Perfect, the word again. Isn't that expensive?" I asked. "Don't worry about it," he cut in. "The money's there. I'll handle it." I hung up, staring at the phone for a long moment. He was going to make my public humiliation a spectacle. That afternoon, Evelyn Price showed up, wrapped in a cloud of perfume and superiority. "Laura dear," she said, stepping inside with her usual grace, "I came to bring you something." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a business card. "Hayes and Associates. Family Law. Free consultation, anytime." Evelyn smiled sweetly. "Just in case you ever need professional advice." The air between us tightened. "That's very thoughtful," I said evenly. "I worry about you, daughter," she replied, her voice dripping with fake affection. It was the first time in 25 years she had ever called me that word. When she left, I sat at the dining table, staring at the card with Mr. Richard Hayes's name printed in gold, the same lawyer from their phone calls, the same man she had told Kevin would handle everything. I opened Kevin's closet that night and found the confirmation, a crumpled card from the same law firm, in his jacket pocket. He came home whistling, full of energy. "Everything's ready," he said brightly. "The restaurant, the guests, the decorations, it's going to be unforgettable." I looked at him for a moment, studying his reflection in the window. He was so sure of himself. "You're right," I said softly. "It will be unforgettable." He grinned, not realizing I meant something entirely different. That night, when he locked himself in his study, I stood outside the door and listened. His voice was low, steady, rehearsing words. "Dear friends, 25 years ago I made a choice, but life changes. People change, and sometimes you must have the courage to admit your mistakes." I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the cold spread through me. He was going to do it. He was going to humiliate me in front of everyone, make it look noble, even justified. When I could finally move again, I went to the safe and pulled out my folder. Inside were the documents that would ruin his perfect plan, the certified confirmation from Thomas Perry, proving the condo was legally my premarital property, and the inheritance papers from Germany. I stared at them, the faint tremor in my hands fading. I wasn't powerless anymore. I was prepared. The following morning, I went to the bank. I opened a new personal account under my name alone, and transferred half of our joint savings, quietly, efficiently. If Kevin wanted to spend his half on his mistress and the perfect party, he could. I would keep mine safe. Then I visited the German consulate to begin the inheritance formalities. The consul, an older man with kind eyes and a meticulous tone, reviewed the documents. "Everything is in order, Mrs. Sterling. The assets will be transferred within 1 week." He slid the folder back toward me. "Your aunt left you quite a legacy." By the time I left the consulate, the autumn air had grown sharp and clear. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. My life had already moved on. Kevin just didn't know it yet. That evening, curiosity led me to the Watergate Hotel. I wanted to see what my husband was preparing. The lobby was filled with flowers, crystal lights, and a staff moving in quiet synchronization. The manager, a cheerful woman with a warm smile, greeted me. "You must be Mrs. Price," she said. "Your husband has been wonderful to work with. Everything's perfect." "How much did it cost?" I asked softly. "About $45,000, she replied. "He wanted only the best. $45,000 from our joint savings to finance my humiliation." "May I see the ballroom?" I asked. She led me through the grand doors. The chandeliers sparkled like ice. Round tables were covered with white roses and gold candles. At the center stood a microphone, perfectly placed for his big speech. I ran my fingers lightly over its cold surface and smiled as I turned to leave. I noticed a young woman standing by the entrance, talking loudly on her phone, blonde, slim, wearing an expensive coat. "Samantha Blake, D. It's incredible," she said, laughing. "The ballroom is stunning. You promised we'd live in a condo like this soon. I can already picture our parties." Her voice was sugar and poisoned. "Yes, baby, I'll see you tonight," she whispered into the phone. Then her eyes met mine. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Do you know where the manager's office is?" She looked me up and down, clearly unimpressed. "No idea," she said, then turned away. "Some woman's asking me questions," she said into her phone. "See you later. Love you." I walked past her without another word. Tomorrow, she would learn exactly who that some woman was. When I got home that night, Kevin was pacing the living room, papers in hand. "Everything's confirmed," he said excitedly. "Tomorrow's the big night." "I know," I said, my voice calm. "It'll be a night to remember." The night arrived like a velvet curtain drawn too tight. The Watergate ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, 100 faces folded into place, like a chorus, waiting for its cue. Kevin stood at the head table, immaculate in a suit that suddenly seemed too large for the man who meant to wear other people's lives like accessories. Evelyn circulated, lips painted the exact color of confidence, collecting compliments and sighs of admiration. Samantha hovered at the periphery, a bright, fragile thing that smiled on command. I moved through the room, as if in a dream, nodding, smiling. the practiced hostess, my purse, a small heavy secret at my side. The manager introduced the evening with the silky voice of someone who expected to keep the night tidy. Plates gleamed, linens fell like pale waves, wine slid into glasses. Everything was, to everyone's eye, perfect. Somewhere in the back of the room, a man in a dark suit sat impassively, Mr. Richard Hayes's presence the only shadow that felt rehearsed. He was there in case a signature was needed, in case humiliation required legal punctuation. Kevin stood and raised his glass. A polite silence curdled into attention. He spoke with the kind of force that only comes from conviction or habit. Friends, thank you for joining us on this special night. 25 years is not nothing. It's a long time to live beside someone who isn't the person you thought you married. The room inhaled. I could feel the weight of every eye like a summer rain on my skin. His voice severed through the soft music, each word a scalpel. I have to be honest, he continued, and honesty is a dangerous cloak. Laura, I have realized I deserve more. I'm filing for divorce, and I hope we can separate with dignity. A ripple of stunned murmurs rose like wind under a tent. Someone gasped, someone else laughed in disbelief. Evelyn's smile was a blade. Kevin's chest puffed as if for a sailor's song. He had practiced the cadence of betrayal until it sounded like righteousness. He named Samantha, framed her as the future, my assistant, my partner, my new hope, and the room shifted, seeking the outline of scandal. I watched him, quiet as a lake in winter. When he had finished, the hush felt like a challenge. People looked at me, waiting for the fall. I stood slowly, took the microphone he had left warm in his hand, and the room stilled as if someone had held its breath for a long time and was only now allowed to exhale. Thank you, Kevin, I said, my voice soft enough to be mistaken for tears. Very honest. I let a pause live between us, a small, deliberate silence that made the chandeliers seem louder. I'd like to add a truth. Papers slid into my palm, certified copies, letters, bank statements, H1, a quiet thunderstorm. I told them what I had found. The messages with Samantha, the searches on his computer, the transfers from our joint account to Hayes and Associates, the hidden loans, the string of receipts that mapped the anatomy of his betrayal. I explained that my parents had gifted the condo to me before Kevin's name was added, and that I had legal confirmation from Thomas Perry. I spoke of the inheritance from my aunt, Josephine, and the German notary's seal that proved I was no longer financially vulnerable. I spoke calmly, without flourish, reading facts like an accountant reads ledgers. The more banal the detail, the more devastating the truth. Mr. Hayes, whom they had hired to make theater of legality, paled as names and dates landed. Guests shifted in their seats, phones waking like small, hungry animals. Samantha's smile faltered, then hardened into something feral as her future unraveled with each sentence. Kevin's face lost the veneer of certainty. His mouth opened and closed like someone searching for an alibi. Then came the part I had been saving, not for revenge, but for clarity. I spoke of the $45,000 banquet he had paid for from our joint funds, the loans he had taken, the payments to Hayes, the promises he had made with money that was not his to spend as he wished. I told them about the answering machine message I had saved, where Evelyn and Mr. Hayes discussed ensuring I would not suspect anything until the last possible moment. People looked at Evelyn then as if seeing an old painting in a new light. The room's murmur grew teeth. One by one, confidences became accusations. A guest near the door stood and said, "Is this true?" The manager, mortified, cleared his throat, and then watched as the tapestry of their plan pulled loose at the edges. Kevin stammered explanations that sounded small. "You don't understand," he said. "It's complicated." But complexity is no shelter from fact. Cameras lifted, phones recorded. The moment snapped into eternity and streamed into the pockets of strangers who would not be kind. Samantha, discarded, began to cry, and then to rage, and those emotions only made the night look worse for her and for him. Evelyn tried to command the room with a queen's voice. Instead, she met incredulous faces and whispers that cut sharper than any robe. When the crowd began to turn, Michael Brooks, Kevin's boss, pulled him aside in the doorway and spoke in tones I would later learn were both quiet and unforgiving. Within 48 hours, a video of the speech and the reveal had flown across the internet like a bird set free. #silver anniversary traitor. They had called it at first, then worse. Kevin's company called him in on Monday, and by Tuesday, his office was an empty shell. By Thursday, he was driving a taxi, learning the city he had once taken for granted from the backseat of strangers' lives. The courts followed the court of public opinion. When we met in front of a judge, the facts spoke in black ink. The deed to the Georgetown condo was my premarital property. The loans and debts, incurred without the purpose of family welfare, were his responsibility. The judge divided the modest shared assets and assigned debts where they belonged. She dissolved the marriage in a tone that felt like the closing line of a chapter. In the weeks that followed, I moved into the Miami apartment that had once been my aunt's. I opened a small publishing house for translations, something I had dreamed about in a drawer for decades. Monica and I toasted quietly on the terrace the night I signed the papers to resign from the company. "Is this revenge?" she asked, smiling. I considered it and answered, "Not revenge, resolution." Samantha married a man 3 months later who liked grand gestures and little scrutiny. Evelyn sold the mansion, moved into a smaller place where the heat bill stung as a reminder. Kevin called once, left a message that said sorry in a voice that tried to sound honest and failed. I kept the message, filed it away. I did not gloat. I walked down a strip of the beach one evening, when the city lights shivered on the water, and thought of the years that had been mine of loyalty, of being underestimated, of how elegantly silence can be used like armor. I felt no triumph so much as relief, a clear line of air where the scent of perfumed lies had been. The truth, in the end, had not destroyed us. It had simply allowed what was honest to live. A few months later, the dust had settled, though Kevin would probably never call it that. He was still driving a second-hand Toyota through the streets of D.C., watching other men in suits hurry toward the same offices that used to open their doors for him. Evelyn lived with him now, a single lamp glowing behind the blinds of their small apartment. Sometimes she waited for him to come home from his night shifts. Other times she just sat in silence, replaying the echo of laughter from a ballroom she would rather forget. Samantha's wedding photos floated briefly through social media before disappearing into the same feed that had once mocked Kevin's downfall. I had learned to sleep through the sound of the ocean. In Miami, the air smelled of salt and possibility. My publishing house had released its first collection, thin volumes of European poetry, translated with care by the small team I had hired. Every morning, I walked to the cafe downstairs, sipped black coffee, and watched people hurry to work. Sometimes someone would recognize me from the video. They would whisper, "That's the woman from the anniversary." I never corrected them. I simply smiled, grateful that the story they remembered was not one of humiliation but of survival. One afternoon, a letter arrived in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. "Laura," it began, "I don't expect forgiveness. I only wanted you to know that I finally understand what I threw away." The words were shaky, written by a man who had lost his arrogance along with everything else. I folded the paper, placed it in the drawer beside the German notary's letter, and closed it quietly. Regret wasn't a currency I traded in anymore. That evening, as the sun dropped into the sea, I walked along the beach barefoot. The sand was cool, the horizon endless. For 25 years, I had been someone's wife, someone's project, someone's shadow. Now, I was simply myself, Laura Sterling. The woman who didn't shout, didn't break things, didn't beg. The woman who let the truth do what anger never could. In the distance, the waves hissed like applause. I smiled, whispered a thank you to the wind, and kept walking. Somewhere behind me, the world kept turning quiet, balanced, fair, and for the first time in a long, complicated story, silence didn't mean defeat. It meant peace. Some revenge doesn't need fire or screams. Sometimes it's just a quiet smile and the strength to walk away. If you've ever chosen silence instead of chaos, leave a heart in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge in Silence, where every story reminds you that silence isn't weakness, it's the smartest form of revenge.